9. Carl M. Roeder. Problems of piano teachers. The progressive teacher's method must be one of accretion, said Carl Roeder, when interviewed between lesson hours in his delightful studio in Carnegie Hall. He gains ideas from many methods and sources, and these he assimilates and makes practical for his work. At the same time, he must originate and work out things for himself. This has been my experience. I was something of a wonder child, and at an early age developed considerable facility and brilliancy. After knocking about as a pupil of various private teachers and conservatories, I became, while quite a young lad, the pupil of Dekonsky, then a lion of the day. The speaker joined in the laugh his remark called up, which brought to mind the Chevalier's famous battle horse, The Awakening of the Lion. Dekonsky's style was very brilliant, and I endeavored to imitate him in this respect. I did quite a little concert work at that time. Realizing, however, that a pianist's income must be rather precarious, I decided to teach. In those youthful days, I had the idea that the teacher of the piano had an easy life. I remembered one of my professors, a man of considerable reputation, who took the duties of his profession very lightly. His method of giving a lesson was to place the music upon the piano, start the pupil going, then retire to a comfortable couch, light his pipe and smoke at ease, troubling himself little about the pupil's doings, except occasionally to call out falsch. So I, too, began to teach the piano. But I soon discovered that teaching was something quite different from what I had imagined it to be, and that it was something I knew very little about. I now set myself to learn how to teach, how to help those pupils who came to me. One of my first discoveries was that most of the pupils were afflicted with stiff wrists and arms, and that this stiffness must be remedied. My own playing had always been free, due to one of my early teachers having thoroughly inculcated the principle of weight, so often acclaimed in these days as a modern discovery. But how to bring about this condition in others was a great problem. I studied the Mason method and found many helpful, illuminating ideas in regard to relaxation and devitalization. I had some lessons with S. B. Mills, and later did considerable valuable work with Paolo Gallico, who opened up to me the great storehouse of musical treasure, and revealed to me among other things the spiritual technique of the pianist's art. Subsequently, I investigated the Virgil and Leschetizky methods. Mr. Virgil has done some remarkable things in the way of organizing and systematizing technical requirements, and for this we owe him much. Such analyses had not before been made with anything like the care and minuteness, and his work has been of the greatest benefit to the profession. My subsequent studies with Harold Bauer revealed him to be a deep musical thinker and a remarkable teacher of the meaning of music itself. In my teaching, I follow many of the ideas of Leschetizky, modified and worked out in the manner which I have found most useful to my own technique and to that of my pupils. I have formulated a method of my own, based on the principles which form a dependable foundation to build the future structure upon. Each pupil at the outset is furnished with a blank book, in which are written the exercises thus developed as adapted to individual requirements. Foundational exercises. We begin with table work. I use about 10 different exercises which embody, as it were, in a nutshell, the principles of piano playing. The hand is first formed in an arched position, with curved fingers and solidified. The thumb has to be taught to move properly, for many people have never learned to control it at all. With the hand in firm, solid position and the arm hanging freely from the shoulder, I begin to use combined arm and wrist movements, aiming to get the weight of the arm as well as its energy at the complete disposal of the fingertip. Each finger in turn is held firmly in a curved position and played with a rotary movement of arm and wrist. When this can be done, we next learn hand action at the wrist, from which results the staccato touch. In this form of hand staccato there is an element of percussion, as you see, but this element gives directness and precision to the staccato touch, which in my opinion are necessary. After this we come to finger action itself. This principle is taken up thoroughly, first with one finger, then with 2, 3, 4, and 5, in all possible combinations. In this way, we come down from the large free arm movements to the smaller finger movements, from the general to the particular, instead of working from the smaller to the larger. I find it most necessary to establish relaxation first, then strengthen and build up the hand, before finger action to any extent is used. When these foundational points have been acquired, the trill, scales, arpeggios, chords, octaves, and double notes follow in due course. At the same time the rhythmic sense is developed, all varieties of touch and dynamics introduced, and harmonic and structural analysis dwelt upon. Use of studies. Above the 3rd or 4th grade, I make frequent use of studies, selecting them from various books. Duvernoy, Op. 120, Behrens, Op. 61, Czerny, Op. 740 I find far more interesting than the threadbare 299. Heller is indispensable, so melodious and musical. Arthur Foote studies, Op. 27, are very useful, also McDowell's, Op. 39 and 46. Sometimes I use a few of Kramer's and the Clementi Gradus, though these seem rather old-fashioned now. For more advanced pupils I find Harberbier, Op. 53 especially applicable. There is beautiful work in them. Kessler, Op. 20 and the Moskowski studies, Op. 72, have splendid material for the advanced player and prepare for Henselt, Rubinstein, Chopin, and Liszt Etudes. I find that studies are valuable for application of technical principles, for reacting purposes, and for the cultivation of all the refinements of playing. Some teachers believe in applying the technique directly to pieces and use almost no studies, but I think a study is often more valuable than a piece, because a definite technical principle is treated in every kind of way. Though I do not require studies to be memorized, they must be played with all the finish of a piece if the pupil is to derive the maximum of benefit from them. Books that are helpful. As aids to my studies in the art of teaching, several books have been most helpful. Among these are 2 volumes by Dr. Herman H. Holm, The Philosophy of Education and The Psychology of Education. Another book, from which I have profited much, is William James Talks to Teachers on Psychology. Every teacher should possess it. You ask what method I pursue with new pupils who have played a great deal of music, but with little idea of correct principles of piano study. Let us take, for instance, one who has had lessons for years, but is in ignorance of first principles. Arms and wrists are stiff, hands and fingers held in cramped position, no freedom anywhere. My first move is to have the pupil stand and learn to relax arms, shoulders, and body, then learn to breathe. But relaxation, even at first, is not the only thing. After devitalization comes organization, firmness, and solidity in the right places. It must be understood at the very beginning that piano playing is far more than sitting before the instrument working the fingers 6 or 7 hours a day. The mechanical side is only preliminary. Someone has said that the factors in playing are a trinity of H's: head, hand, and heart. I try at once to awaken thought, to give a wider outlook, to show that piano playing is the expression, through the medium of tone, of all that the poet, painter, and philosopher are endeavoring to show through other means. To this end I endeavor to stimulate interest in the wonders of the visible universe, the intellectual achievements of men, and the deep things of spiritual discernment. In regard to interpretation. On this subject I think we should avoid pedantry, not to say to the pupil, you must play this piece a certain way, but rather say, I see or feel it in this way, and give the reasons underlying the conception. I believe the successful teacher should be a pianist. He should understand every point and be able to do the thing, else how can he really show the manner of the doing? Many of the nuances, subtleties of color and phrase, effects of charm or of bravura, cannot be explained. They must be illustrated. And furthermore, only he who has been over the road can be a safe or sympathetic guide. Tolstoy realized he could not be of service to the people he would uplift unless he lived among them, shared their trials, and experienced their needs. The time has gone by when the musician and composer was considered a sort of freak, knowing music and nothing else. We know the great composers were men of the highest intelligence and learning, men whose aim was to work out their genius to the utmost perfection. Nothing less than the highest would satisfy them. As George Eliot said, genius is the capacity for taking infinite pains. Think of the care Beethoven took with every phrase, how many times he did it over, never leaving it till he was satisfied. In speaking of the great European teachers, Mr. Roeder continued, We hear much of the Lesketitsky method, but with that master technique is quite a secondary matter over which, when once the principles are mastered, he troubles himself but little. It is the conception of the work as a whole which concerns him, how to project it, so to say, most effectively to an audience. He brings into prominence now this part, now that, accenting here, slightly exaggerating there, in order to make the picture more vivid to the listener. Harold Bauer is another illuminating master for those who have a technical equipment adequate to the performance of great works of piano literature. Some go to him who are not ready for what he has to give, but to those who can direct attention to the meaning of the music, he is a wonderful inspirational force. First he will point out a phrase here, another there, and so on through the piece, showing how the same idea takes on various aspects in the composer's thought. Then he shows how to gather up these different threads to form the perfect pattern which the author of the work had in mind, and finally the master teacher reaches down below the surface of form and design to the vital significance of the composition, and the disciple feels the glow and power of the revelation. There is no gainsaying the fact that this age is superficial, and the great office of art is to cultivate that idealism which will uplift and inspire. In an important sense, the teacher must be a preacher of righteousness. He knows that beautiful things are fashioned from clay, but it has first to pass through the fire, and only those who can endure that scorching can hope to achieve success. Question of personality. If asked to what extent a player's personality enters into the performance, my answer would be, only in so far as the performance remains true to the composer's intention. So long as personality illumines the picture and adds charm, interest, and effectiveness to it, it is to be applauded, but when it obstructs the view and calls attention to itself, it should not be tolerated. It is not art, it is vanity. Yes, I teach both high finger action and pressure touch, once the principle of arm weight is thoroughly established, although I use high finger action only to develop finger independence and precision, and for passages where sharp delineation is required. I believe in freedom of body, arm and wrist, a firm, solid arched hand and set fingers. That freedom is best which ensures such control of the various playing members as to enable the player to produce at will any effect of power, velocity, or delicacy desired, thereby placing the entire mechanical apparatus under complete subjection to the mind, which dominates the performance. In other words, I am neither an anarchist who wants no government, namely unrestrained devitalization, nor a socialist, whose cry is for all government, that is, restriction and rigidity. In piano playing, as in all else, virtue is the happy mean between two vices.